the more time and energy and effort you can spend on figuring out how they think, how they process information, what's important to them, what their action belief is, meaning that if all goes well, what do they believe? Doesn't necessarily mean their belief system is accurate, but what do they believe will happen if everything goes perfectly? What do they believe will happen if they don't take action or it doesn't go as planned? Understanding those types of dynamics allows you to go to market with messaging that's designed to cut through the noise, because it's not about facts and figures. It's about the emotions that your ideal client is experiencing as it pertains to your goods and services. It allows you to create messaging that is radically different than the competitors. It's one of those scenarios that maybe you've experienced in the past where you read a message or you see a message and you feel this feeling inside like, wow, this company gets me.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, I'm excited today because we're going to have a great discussion about something that, I've had a passion for a long time, primarily because I struggled with it in my early years, right? And that is really how to connect, in a deeply human way so that we can essentially benefit our world, right? And it starts with being able to support ourselves and our own family, right? So how do you do that? And I think from a marketing perspective and from a sales perspective, I think that's kind of the magic that, is really the differentiator. And I'm looking forward to us having a discussion on how we get to that point to create our own magic, because we have Stormie Andrews on the show with us today. Stormie, welcome.
Hey, I'm glad to be here and so excited to be here with your group.
So the B2B DM gang is, really focusing in on how do I generate more leads? How do I, actually convert? How do I make more sales? How do I grow my business? And then also retain. And we're going to hit all of those aspects when we start talking about the world's best buyer persona system, because you're the author. But if you could tell the B2B DM gang a little bit about your background and expertise.
So my background, I like to think that I've been building buyer persona since I was in third grade. And the reason that I can say that with authority is my dad had a job for the government where we moved a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot, where it wasn't until my 11th and 12th grade year in high school that I experienced what it was like to go to the same school 2 years in a row. Just didn't know what it was like. Sometimes I would go to 3 different schools within the same school year. And every time we would move, my parents realized that sometimes the moves were going to be short term, sometimes they were going to be long term, but I was a kid. I just knew we were moving. So I ended up in situations where we were moving all around the country, and I just knew I wanted to meet new friends. And it gave me the ability, one, to reinvent myself as we moved to different communities, because what I discovered is that many of the communities that we moved into were drastically different than the others. I'll put it this way. Some communities valued being tough. Other communities valued education. Other communities valued your skin color, background, education, all these components that most people don't have to think about when they're growing up in the same community. If you look at me, for those of you that are watching video, my background, I'm actually black, but I look white. You know what I mean? So there's a scenario as we moved into a wide variety of communities, I had this interesting dynamic of being able to, or having to blend into a wide variety of different circumstances.
So I have to ask, so what happens when a black guy gets invited to a neo-Nazi party?
When that happens, I don't want to give up everything because you can find that in the introduction in the book, but I have been invited to a neo-Nazi party, and I've been invited to these types of scenarios more than once. But when it happens and you're accustomed to that type of thing happening, you can have lots of fun with it. And that's exactly what I did.
So you had the opportunity to make a decision. And like you said, we'll leave a lot of the detail about the story into the book, but you had a decision to either, kick that customer to the curb or serve them. And in the book, you chose the path to serve them, but you served them in a way by which, it was really for them, initially, was fulfilling, right? And I would dare to say, he would possibly even recommend you to other people, at a certain point.
Quite possibly.
Quite possibly. But it was really that you were focusing in on them, and kind of like you were saying about reinventing yourself and the whole buyer persona system, you were still applying it there, just maybe in a different manner or way. However, I think a lot of us are just doing it by default, which is problematic. Right. And then because of that, we're creating and generating a lot of mistakes. So if you could, please explain to us, what is the world's best buyer persona system?
Well, as we moved into this world of all things or most things being digital, the world's best buyer persona system. Well, let me back up for just a moment. The term of a buyer persona is a fictional representation of your ideal customer. That's what it's been. That's been the classic definition of the term a buyer persona. Well, the world's best buyer persona takes it a step further, because now we're in this digital world, and it's a system to help you train your most valuable, your most important employee. And who is that most valuable and important employee? Those are your digital employees, your website. It's not a billboard. It's not a business card. It's an employee, and you should train it as such. So what the world's best buyer persona system does is it helps you train your website, your digital assets to communicate more effectively and help you attract your most valuable customers, while at the same time repelling the people you don't want to do business with, or the ones that shouldn't be part of your business. So it's a system to train that employee. Did that make sense?
It does. And then from a digital perspective, and you start looking at, say, sales enablement, when you start, thinking about, the overall aspects of business and business growth and hyper growth and accelerated growth and all of those elements, we start looking at this as an overall, ecosystem that needs to support one another and customer alignment. Because you talk about trust, in the book, and I keep hearing this, thematically, as time continues to go by and complexity and noise and all of those things, continue to be added, and I have to think about the buyer persona system, in a way that enables, supports, so that, customers can ultimately come to some conclusions based on where they are. We talk about the 4 stages of buyer awareness: unaware, problem aware, solution aware, and then provider aware. And this system allows you to touch all of those, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, just take a step back for just a moment, going back to the definition of what the world's best buyer persona is. I left off a very, very important component. By training your most valuable employee, your digital employee, in order to do that, your real employees, your real life people have to be trained to better empathize and gain trust with their customers. Otherwise, there's no way to train your employees. So the world's best buyer persona system, by training that digital employee, also gives you the ability of training your traditional human employees that have a heartbeat. But in order to train those employees, you have to understand the buyer's journey. You have to be able to become a resource for the consumers of your goods and services in a way that's looking out for them and their best interests, not you or the business in your best interest. And that's a big shift. And a lot of businesses, when I speak to them, will say, we are absolutely looking out for our customers' best interests. But when we look at the messaging and we look at what they're putting out there in the world, it's all about them. It's all about the business. It's obvious, and there's tons of evidence that they've spent very little time, energy, and effort really figuring out who their customers are, what their pain points are, what are their struggles, what were their triggering events that have had to have happened for them to get to this point right now to be in the market or for their goods and services. If that energy hasn't been spent, I would say that maybe you're not putting your customers' best interests first. It's almost impossible to do.
Well, and those interests, like, going into those 4 stages, is part of what we have to think about from a buyer's journey. I mean, a lot of people, going back to that 1%, possibly being ready to purchase what we're selling. But even if we're starting to talk about that 1%, it doesn't mean that they're aware of a problem that they have. They're not aware of a product. So if we start thinking about all of that, how does the buyer's persona system, the world's best buyer persona system, address those 4 stages?
So what happens as it pertains to those stages, if you're aware of the pain points that your customers are going through, in reality, you're probably not the solution for all their pains, issues, and struggles. And when someone's in that unaware stage, you have an incredible, you're put in incredible, basically you have the ability of becoming an incredible resource to the people that may or may not be in the market for your goods and services, but people that are experiencing a pain that you could potentially be a solution. When I have people who reach out to me, to give you an example, oftentimes I'll have consultations with businesses that could use my services, but I'm not their best solution. So I probably refer more customers out to other agencies and other providers of services that are a better solution for them at this particular junction. Now, let me tell you what happens because of that. Over the years of being in a position to send lots of clients to a wide variety of agencies, I have more agencies that refer business to us than we can handle. That's a great position to be in. So if we think about your business, and if you understand when someone's having a pain, they're having an issue, and they're in the unaware stage as it pertains to solutions, maybe you can put out a piece of content, or you can put out messaging that lists you as one of the solutions, but maybe give them alternatives and options to other solutions, other paths that they can follow, and to help them find the best solution for their pain point, their issue. That helps you become a trusted provider, because you're not that person out there saying that we're the best solution for everything and anything. You don't want to be that person. It doesn't work. It's not effective. And you don't gain credibility and trust by doing that. That's stuff we used to do back in the 80s.
Back in the 80s? Does that mean it's going to come back around again?
No. See, there's a scenario there that people don't realize. It used to be that companies had all the power. The reason they had all the power is because they had all the information. They had every bit of it. They had the information, and the customers would go to their salespeople to get the information to make an informed decision. Well, today, the consumers of your goods and services have all the information. Whatever information they want, they can go online and they can find it. So you have 2 choices. Do you want to be the person that wants to hide all that information when the information is readily available? Or do you want to be the person that provides that information in a clear and concise way designed to help them get past whatever pain point or issue that they're struggling with? If you're that person, I can tell you it comes back and it pays dividends.
Okay, if you think about that, kind of break it down into, you talk about the different customers and clients that you've been able to serve. And if I'm looking specifically at the B2B, just think about that as a niche, right?
Right.
How does it differ in the B2B world versus the B2C world when you start talking about, addressing these 4 stages using the system?
So in the B2B world, it's incredibly powerful, because what happens in the B2B world, oftentimes, what I have found is that you have someone that has to make a decision, in many cases, a consequential decision as it pertains to their company. So this may be a purchasing manager, a VP of whatever, but it's someone who has to make a decision, oftentimes a decision that if it's the wrong decision, it could be detrimental to the company. Is that a fair statement in many of the B2B scenarios?
Or at least they fear that.
They fear that, exactly. At least they fear that. So understanding that they have this fear, that they have to make a decision that is a safe decision, considering to go with a new provider, a new vendor versus their tried and trusted vendor, right? You want to be that person that wants to get your foot in the door. Well, why should they go with you? Because you say you have the best widget on the planet that's going to help them in their manufacturing process? Maybe, but a stronger motivator is helping them understand as helping them have a warm and fuzzy as to you being a safe provider. Something that allows them to make the decision in a safe way, where if it doesn't go right, their butt's not on the line, if that makes sense. So in the B2B space, you're still dealing with people, but you have to understand their emotions, especially if you're a new vendor wanting to get your foot in the door with an organization that you haven't done business with. You really have to convince them that you are a safe investment to give a shot.
Well, I mean, as you're talking through that, I start thinking about, well, isn't everybody trying to do that now? I mean, we talk about post-COVID, and I was talking to somebody, earlier, where if you just even look at the amount of podcasts that were pre-COVID, there was there's almost 2 million. Well, now there's almost 3 million. So in a very, very short period of time, all of these podcasts launched. So the amount of noise, is just immense. And when you start also looking at business filings, in the third quarter of 2020, there were more business filings for new businesses that have ever been received by that government office ever before.
Wow.
So the noise is just going to continue to escalate. When you start looking at the X factor, it's significant. So, again, how can I, really differentiate by using the system, knowing that the noise level has just doubled, tripled, or quadrupled?
So typically, here's what happens when it comes to noise in the B2B space, really any space, but you have a new product, you have a new service that services your clients, or a product that's going to help your clients. You've been intimately involved in the development of this product or this service, and now you want to take it to market. So you're sharing all of these facts and figures in regards to how good this product or how great this service is to the market that you serve. That's normally the approach that most organizations take. And if all your competitors are taking the same approach, telling the world how great you are and how great your product and your service and blah, 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 that's what everyone else is doing. Well, what this system helps you do is it helps you get into the mindset, the motivations, what motivates the person who's going to make the decision to go with your company as a provider. The more time and energy and effort you can spend on figuring out how they think, how they process information, what's important to them, what their action belief is, meaning that if all goes well, what do they believe? Doesn't necessarily mean their belief system is accurate, but what do they believe will happen if everything goes perfectly? What do they believe will happen if they don't take action or it doesn't go as planned? Understanding those types of dynamics allows you to go to market with messaging that's designed to cut through the noise, because it's not about facts and figures. It's about the emotions that your ideal client is experiencing as it pertains to your goods and services. It allows you to create messaging that is radically different than the competitors. It's one of those scenarios that maybe you've experienced in the past where you read a message or you see a message and you feel this feeling inside like, wow, this company gets me. I relate with this organization. We're one of the same, right? Those types of feelings are extremely powerful when it comes to the decision-making process. Studies have shown that 80% of our decisions are based on emotions, 20% on logic. Most of the time we make decisions based on emotions and then we justify it with logic. So understanding that statistic, why wouldn't you want to create messaging that's designed to resonate with someone on an emotional level? And that's exactly what the world's best buyer persona helps you do throughout their entire buyer's journey.
Okay, so then as I'm thinking about this, I start in my head picturing the whole sales funnel, marketing funnel. When I start thinking about that, and you're talking, and I start looking at the whole top of the funnel piece, mid funnel piece, and I'm also starting to look at these 4 stages of awareness, and I start thinking about all this noise. I think it's beginning. It's even more difficult than it's ever been to get people in the top, right?
Absolutely.
Because everybody else is creating, top of funnel, early stage, type of messaging. So I could, play this out with me, embellish with me a little bit.
Okay.
I use the buyer persona system. I do all of this. I change my web copy. I change, some cadences and sequences. I've put together, the messaging around that. I've created some templates. I'm trying to do lead gen, and I'm trying to actually acquire. Now, how do I segment and strategize all this to where, first of all, how do I get attention, right? Because attention is that's golden these days. But
right.
Then how do I move them to mid funnel quickly?
So what the world's best buyer persona does is, the first thing you need to do is identify who do you want to get attention from. Oftentimes that's overlooked. It's like, I just want to get attention. I throw a message out there to the world and you end up getting attention from no one. So the first thing that the world's best buyer persona helps you identify is who you want to get attention from. That's really, really important. Then once we realize who we want to get attention from, now we start working on their pain points, their issues, their motivations, their concerns, what would help you gain respect and trust from those particular individuals. And now what happens, because you have a greater understanding of that particular person, it allows you to create messaging where you can go and better determine what types of questions they may be asking Google, what types of questions may they be asking friends and colleagues, and what type of messaging that they're currently seeing in the marketplace. Understanding that allows you to at least begin the process of crafting a strategy and a plan that is dramatically different and, in most cases, significantly more effective than the rest of the messaging out there. It's a pretty incredible process that once someone goes down this path and they start looking at the messaging that's out there, I've had people laugh at themselves because they're like, man, I've been putting out the exact same crap that everyone else has been putting out in our space. And this gave me clarity as it pertains to my customers, unlike I've ever had before. And they said, Stormie, before going through this process, I really, really thought I knew who our ideal client was. I thought I understood everything there was to know about them. And what they've discovered is that they really didn't. And the greater your understanding of your ideal client, the better you can craft messaging that's designed to resonate with them.
Okay, so as you're talking about that, and I had mentioned early on, that I had struggled with some things, and I have made some investments and put some effort forth, and not performing poorly in those particular areas, and I even became certified in emotional intelligence. This is a book that I keep on my desk, and I reference all the time. And for those who are just listening, it's called the People Skills Handbook: Action Tips for Improving Your Emotional Intelligence. And one of the authors, Roger Pearman, was actually my mentor and teacher in my certification process for emotional intelligence out of MHS out of Canada. Do we have to go through all of the effort that I have gone through in order to really, be differentiated from everyone else, or is that not necessary?
When you say go through everything that you've gone through in terms of going to get certified in emotional intelligence, well, it certainly doesn't hurt, right? But in most businesses, most people don't have the ability of doing that. You just don't. You don't have the ability of going to get, we can spend a lifetime gathering education. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's a great thing if you have the ability of doing it. But as it pertains to your business, or it pertains to what you have there in front of you, you're better served finding someone that maybe has figured out a system or a strategy or some sort of a blueprint that's going to help you get from point A to point B that has some sort of proven success behind it. So if you can go get certified in emotional intelligence, more power to you, go for it. But if you don't, or if you can't, well, look for some systems that are out there. And I'm not saying that the world's best buyer persona system is the only system. I'm just saying it's a system that's worked for lots of businesses, that's been extremely beneficial and powerful. But there's no need for you to reinvent the wheel in today's world, because there's lots of great information out there from some very, very smart people that are designed to help you get better results. Did I answer the question? Because I don't know if I answered the question.
Well, I think for me, I hear a lot of people say, hey, you now have to become a behavioral scientist in order to separate yourself from everyone else. I did that out of for some of my own personal reasons to really achieve something in this particular area, because like I had said, I knew I had some personal struggles along with it. And like you were saying, am I perfect, by applying those things? And am I perfect, in all the core areas of emotional intelligence? No. Is it a lifelong journey and effort? Of course it will be. Yeah. But it's like you were saying, is that how can we take this and apply this in a way by which would allow us to stand out without having to go and get a doctorate, right? And I think you did answer that. So that's very helpful. But then I start getting into the whole timing piece. Man, am I talking about forklift overhauls? Am I talking about, is this a 24-month type of transformation process? Give me another understanding and expectation of what I would be embarking upon.
So here's the cool thing about the world's best buyer persona system. It's designed to help you identify one ideal customer at a time. Just one. We're not looking at your entire database or your entire stream of customers, but let's look at your most ideal customer and let's create an experience that's exceptional for them. You see, if you're in a scenario to where you can get more of your ideal customers doing business with you, well, that's a great position to be in, but it also puts you in the position of being able to say no to your less than ideal customers. Sometimes I'll ask people, who are you doing business with today? Are you doing business with your ideal customers, or are you doing business with whoever you can do business with? There's a big difference between those two organizations. So what the world's best buyer persona system is all about, it's about creating or completing one bridge at a time. It's not about creating messaging for everyone on the planet. Most businesses have multiple personas that would be considered ideal. Well, let's choose the most ideal and let's create an incredible experience for that person. Let's help them throughout the buyer's journey. Let's help them with a better experience in the awareness and consideration and decision stage, which by doing that helps speeds up the sales process because you're giving them the resources and the tools that they need to make a more informed decision. Once you put that process in place, guess what happens? You get to start on your next most ideal client, and it becomes that much easier because you've already done the process once. It becomes a process that is easily replicated from customer to customer after you do the first one, and it's designed to help you become that trusted provider in the marketplace because you're putting yourself in a situation to where you're providing a superior experience. And like it or not, we're in an experiential economy. That's the world that we're in. Experience means everything. It's either a good experience or a bad experience. You can look at Amazon. Amazon disrupted the retail industry by providing a superior experience. In your industry, I would say that it's likely that if your industry hasn't been disrupted yet, there is someone sitting someplace in a room with a pad of paper working on figuring out how to disrupt your industry. Why shouldn't it be you?
I think it's a great point. Well, okay, so then you start, taking this, and you mentioned it a little bit there. You're talking about experience and being able to create that experience and a differentiated experience, but yet you talk about taking an anti-sales approach, and to acquire those customers, and you presented an acronym which is TINB. So tell us a little bit about what you mean from an anti-sales approach and what TINB means.
Absolutely. When I think of the typical sales approach, I think of buying a car. I don't know of too many people who enjoy the process of buying a car. Do you enjoy the process of buying a car? If you've ever done it and you've gone to a car dealership, it's an antiquated process that isn't that joyful. Now, 2 years ago, I bought a Tesla. And when I bought the Tesla, it actually was an enjoyable experience. I reached out to them and said I wanted to test drive a car. They said, we'll have one waiting for you and you can just take it home overnight and bring it back. That was pretty awesome. And then to complete the purchase, I did it all over an app. Never had to deal with the salesperson. That was an incredible experience. It was an anti-sales approach. There was no pressure. There was no need. They made it really, really easy for me to create that purchase. They did a phenomenal job. So going back to the TINB acronym, what that stands for is there is no B. And the question I would pose is, what are you doing in your business? Have you even considered what you can be doing in your business to where your customers feel that there is no B, meaning that there is no other provider that they would consider? Oftentimes in organizations, there are A equals B providers. What does that mean? That means from a consumer standpoint, because remember, the world's best buyer persona is always thinking about the mindset of your customers, the consumer of your goods and services. So even in the B2B space, they are consumers of your goods and services. So if you are an A equals B provider, well, now your value proposition is price. Because I, as the consumer of your goods and services, if I see you as being equivalent to other providers, who's cheaper, who's more convenient, that's who I'm going to go with. That is an A equals B provider, and that's not a fun place to be because over time, it tends to turn into a race to the bottom, profits erode, and it's just not a fun place to be in it because there's always larger and bigger players that can come in with a lower price. A better position to be in is A is greater than B, meaning that if you are the A provider, if you are greater than B, that means from the consumers of your goods and services, from their perspective, they appreciate the value that you bring to the table. They prefer to do business with you. They like the experience of doing business with you. So price isn't the number one concern, but it is a concern. But they understand the value that you bring to the table and they appreciate it. That's a much, much better position to be in. The pinnacle is TINB. They couldn't imagine not doing business with you. And here's the cool thing about that process. When they can't imagine not doing business with you, oftentimes what happens is they can't imagine others not doing business with you. They become your greatest advocates. They become your greatest raving fans because they're the ones on the street corner singing praises. Go to the customers that you have right now that send you an incredible amount of referrals. Those are the individuals that are your TINB consumers of your goods and services. Ask them, what have you done that has made their experience so incredible that they're out telling others about your goods and services? Those are the best employees to have in your payroll. They tend to give you the best leads. They're working for you all the time, and they send some of the best customers to you, is what I would assume in your business. So it's about having more of the consumers of your goods and services have you in a position as a TINB because they will send you more referrals, they'll leave you better reviews, and they become the greatest advocates of your brand.
Well, as you're talking, I start thinking about one of the traps that is so easy to fall into, especially when we start talking about, digital sales, digital marketing, automation, systems, platforms. And that is the trap of taking what you were just saying is the importance and the value of building relationships versus transactions. Right. And meeting metrics. I have quarterly goals. I have weekly goals. I have yearly goals, whatever the case may be. Can you talk a little bit about making sure that we don't fall into the trap of diminishing everything that you were talking about, because we're chasing transactions versus relationships?
Absolutely. There's something, when I do training, I talk about the wow experience. And ask yourself this: what are you doing that once the person writes the check, they give the credit card, they sign the contract, what are you doing to make that experience exceptional from that point forward? You see, oftentimes in many cases, there's a disconnect in realities between the organization and the person who just signed the contract to do business with you. And here's what I mean by that. The person who just signed the contract to consume your goods and services feel that, wow, this was a relationship that I had some fear, I had some trepidation. I was considering them as opposed to other competitors, but I decided to go with you for whatever the reason may be. I believe, as the consumer of your goods and services, I believe that a great relationship is about to begin, right? That's the belief system there was some fear, there was some trepidation, and maybe it starts to wane off as the relationship builds upon itself. But the business, oftentimes, based on their actions, treats the relationship as if a divorce just happened. And what I mean by that is the person signs the contract. What does the salesperson do? They go off there looking for new leads instead of enhancing the relationship they just got. It's no different than a one-night stand. I mean, it's horrible, but that's what happens oftentimes in sales. Here's one of the things that you can do to really enhance those relationships is look for processes that you can do to extend the relationship to wow that relationship from the moment that they sign the check. These are the extras. These are the intangibles that takes that fear and trepidation that they originally had, and it reduces that stress significantly. So then once you reduce the stress, you have the ability of taking someone who's a customer and a client and turning them into a valued colleague. You can't leave it up to chance. You can't have a scenario to where you say, well, Johnny does it because he's just a great salesperson, but the other ones don't. It's a system and a process that you need to put in place for all of your customers. Think of McDonald's, for instance. They don't make the best burgers in the world, but you can go to a McDonald's anywhere in the world and your experience is going to be pretty consistent. You know what to expect from a Quarter Pounder or a Big Mac. As it pertains to your customers, what experiences can you put in place that's designed to elevate that relationship the moment they become a customer of yours? And that's something that's often overlooked because the organization says, we've got the check, let's move on, instead of enhancing and massaging and taking that relationship to the next level. The greatest opportunity that I've seen overlooked by far with most organizations that I deal with.
Okay, so then people will start talking about getting into the onboarding process. When you started referring to that, and then like you were saying, that's a whole different other element to the relationship. But is it okay? Because as you started talking about this, I started thinking about the relationship that was built with the person who's, whether they're sales development, account management, or something like that, and then switching over into customer or client success in the B2B world. That transition has to take place somehow, right? How do you see that working best?
Start the transition earlier in the sales process. That's the formula that works. Oftentimes that transition happens right after the contract signed. And now it's like, okay, now I've got to deal with a new person. Well, if you feel pretty confident in the sale, start introducing your client, because you're absolutely correct. The salesperson is one with the relationship. But if you can figure out a way to start introducing the person that you're going to hand off to earlier in the process, maybe before the contract is signed, that puts you in a position to where that handoff becomes much smoother, because they don't even see it as a handoff.
You also mentioned something I think is critically important, because when I've asked the question on why did people choose to do business with you, the response that I often get from folks is something along the lines to the results that they deliver or have provided. And I said, no, that's not the answer I'm looking for. I'm looking for the answer, as you kind of stated it, is they just signed the agreement and they made and are decided to go with you. Why did they put, proverbial, pen to paper, right? Why did they do that? And so for me, it's like taking and understanding that in depth, and then making sure that that's really what we're focusing in on, enhancing to get to the wow. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. The reason that I believe that they signed the contract is because at that moment they know, they like, and they trust you. So what it comes, that's my belief. They know, they like, and they trust you, and you don't want to blow it now. You've got someone that knows you, they like you, and they trust you. Well, how can you extend that?
Got it. That's very helpful. Okay, so the other thing you talk about is, gaining authority through trust.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of different perspectives when you start talking about authority, when you start talking about trust, when you start talking about influencer, and all of those types of things. If you could explain what you mean exactly by that.
Yeah, so there's an exercise in the book that it takes you through, is really identifying your positioning factors. Oftentimes when I meet with organizations, we'll start diving into an exercise of what separates you from the competition. What are your positioning factors in the marketplace? And when we start this exercise, in most cases, the positioning factors that companies tend to come up with is the same stuff that everyone else is saying. It's what I like to call a "so what me too" statement. So when a company says something like, well, one of our positioning factors is we have great customer service. My response to that would be, so what, me too, because all of your other competitors, that's exactly what they're going to be saying. That's what they're going to be saying. True or not, that's what they're going to be saying. So that's not a positioning factor. You're in business. You're expected to have great customer service. What sets you apart from the competitors? Well, then the next answer is something like, well, we've been family owned for the last 35 years. So what? Me too. I have a lot of families that I've come across that I don't like. You know what I mean? Just because you're family owned. So what? Me too. What sets you apart in the marketplace? And what can you say that very few others, if any, can say that's defensible? Oftentimes something that has an opposing, it's defensible, and there's an opposing viewpoint, meaning that if you're saying you have great customer service, I would ask, do your competitors advertise that they have poor customer service? If that's the case, well, then maybe we can consider that, because you've taken a position. So those are some of the things that exercise is designed to do. And it's a tough exercise. When I have companies sit down and determine their positioning factors, sometimes it may take them hours or days to figure out positioning factors that really differentiate them within the marketplace.
So I call that, you have to actually do I need to clean it up a little bit.
Okay.
Your BFD factor.
Your BFD factor.
BFD. Big freaking deal.
Yeah, there it is. Absolutely. I love it. Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, it's. I think that you put that quite well. The positioning factors, and we those are sometimes quite humbling in a lot of different ways. So that's extremely helpful. Okay, so now you talk about advantages. We've talked about differentiation. We talked about noise, cracking through the noise. I mean, we talked about retention. Client success. But you talk about the buyer's journey possibly being a secret weapon. So, again, my perspectives are different on what that may mean versus everybody else who's watching or listening. So if you could share with us, what do you really mean by that?
So what happens is when we look at most organizations, what we have found is that most organizations spend the vast majority of their time, energy, and resources on the people that are in the decision stage, people that are looking to make a decision to go with their goods and services in a relatively short period of time. They're at the end of the buyer's funnel. Well, what if, and what would it mean to your business if you spent some quality time, you put some resources towards those individuals that aren't in the decision stage, but if you started figuring out what their pain points, their issues and struggles, well before they get to the decision stage, well before, if you can get to them before the competitors even know that they exist, and you can start influencing their thoughts, their behaviors, their decision-making process, what would that mean to your business if you were to spend some time upstream? And that's really where the unfair advantage comes in, because it really doesn't matter the industry. From what I've found is that the vast majority of your competitors, the vast majority of them, are spending a tremendous amount of time for the people looking to do business today. Let's start spending time. Let's say if you have a 3-month sales cycle in the B2B space, if you have a 3-month sales cycle, what if you start spending time on people that are 18 months out, 12 months out? What resources can you provide to them? So when they do get to 3 months out, a year from now, you're going to be in a position that your competitors aren't really even part of the equation, because maybe during that time frame you were able to become their TINB. You were able to become that trusted person that they feel they must do business with if they're able to do business with them. It's an investment in time. There's no question about it. You can't be focusing on the awareness stage thinking that you're going to get results 3 months from now. Remember, we're looking for people that are a year out, 18 months out, a significantly longer time than your typical sales cycle. If you can influence those individuals with content and material that's designed to help them, it really becomes an unfair advantage.
Yeah, I would dare to say what you just identified right there. It's like the 1% of the 1% that is, really focusing in that particular area. It's literally the millions, if not billions, possibly even globally trillions of dollars that are being spent, trying to make more sales. It's everybody's right in that decision stage marketing.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So I'm sitting here though, my ecosystem, and I've talked about this a lot for those who listen to the show, it continues to grow in sales and digital marketing. Lines are getting blended. I have new roles that are coming out for organizations in the revenue generation and revenue operations. It's, the complexity is going up. I have security, I have privacy, I start thinking about all of these things. It could be totally overwhelming when I start looking at strategy. And I would dare to say that even based on our discussion right here, our strategy has some pretty big holes in it. If I started to look at 2022, I'm preparing for 2022. What does a digital marketer need to do right now to have a better 2022?
So what do you need to do right now? Grab a pen and paper, pause this podcast if you don't have it, grab a pen and paper. And I want you to do a self-audit of your marketing in these 8 categories I'm about to share with you. And what you can do is, the 8 categories are awareness. How would you rate the awareness of your goods and services? This is for someone that's not familiar with your brand, right? But if I was looking for the services that you provide, how would you rate your services on a scale of 1 to 5? 5 being that you're a rock star, 1 being non-existent, 3 average, 4 above average, 2 below average. Make sense? That's area number 1. How would you rate yourself? The next one is engagement. Whatever you're doing to engage with your fans and your customers, how would you rate that on a scale of 1 to 5? Are people engaging with your messaging? Are they watching your YouTube videos, opening your emails, whatever metrics you're using to get people to engage? Is that working? So then, when we look at, from engagement, let's look at lead generation. Are you generating leads? That's important. I would rate your lead generation. From lead generation, the next category would be conversion optimization. Are you converting the leads that you're getting? Then from conversion optimization, wow, do a self-audit of your wow. Do you have anything in place that's designed to wow your newest customers to help them become raving fans of your brand, right? Do you have a wow system in place? You'll rate yourself there. The next area I would have you rate yourself is a customer ladder, meaning that what systems and processes do you have in place that helps more of your customers become clients, more of your clients become advocates, more of your advocates become raving fans. What's the difference? Well, a customer will do business with you once when they need your goods and services. A client, you're top of mind. They'll do business with you again. An advocate, not only you're top of mind, but they consider you to be more valuable. They'll leave positive reviews and testimonials for you. They are advocates of your brand. Raving fans are the best because they are your TINB people. They'll tell others to come and see you. From there, when we go from the customer ladder, the next area we'll look at are reviews. What are people saying about you? Even in the B2B space, there are platforms where people have the ability of rating how good you are, how bad you are, what are they saying about you publicly, and then from there, referrals. I would do a self-audit in all of those 8 areas. And then once you do the self-audit in those 8 areas, look at that. And it's something that we call a marketing wheel. So we do it in a wheel format. We call it a marketing wheel. But what I would recommend you do for next year, for 2022, is just look at one of those areas, just one. And what can you do? What plan can you put in place? What KPIs can you put in place? What tools and tactics do you need to use to take one of those scores and just take it up to the next level? Just focus on one. Just focus on one at a time. Complete that, then move on to the next. That's how you make marketing a little less complicated, because marketing, if you break it down into those bite-sized chunks, you can look at the area where you can have the greatest impact and focus on that area. And then you'll start to see incremental changes and improvements to your marketing instead of having another year of disappointment because nothing happened.
Stormie Andrews.
And last but not least, if you really want to impact those 8 areas that we talked about, well, wouldn't it be beneficial to know more about your customer than you've ever known before? You see, we call that a marketing wheel because what sits at the hub, what sits at the center of any wheel is the hub. We like to think the world's best buyer persona is the hub of your marketing wheel. The more information, the more knowledge, the more clarity you have as it pertains to your ideal clients, the greater impact you can have in those 8 areas that I just shared with you.
Stormie Andrews, I had a fun time chatting with you today. Can you please share with the B2B DM gang how they can get in touch with you?
Yes, here's what you can do, and I'm going to make it a step further. If you go to outsmarttools.com, that's the best way of getting a hold of me. I've got lots of resources for you. And I'm going to take it a step further. When you go to outsmarttools.com, there's a link at the very top that says Marketing Wheel Exercise. That's going to give you an exercise where there's videos where I will walk you through the process of completing your marketing wheel audit. And when it's done, you're going to get a Google spreadsheet document from me that becomes a living, breathing document for you, for your marketing wheel, where you can start taking action with other resources designed to help you impact each of those areas of your marketing wheel. How's that?
Stormie Andrews, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and those resources, and we wish you the very best.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.